It is opening day, April 6th, 2023, a veritable regional holiday in Southeast Michigan. Thousands of revelers will be in downtown Detroit, and radios tuned in at office desks, whether they're at home or in a cubicle, to listen to the Detroit Tigers start their season. Even for those who are not sports fans, opening day is a sure sign of spring. I am Jer Stays. Welcome to your Daily Detroit. And Fletcher Sharp, I was out at Ferndale Project yesterday. It was so warm, like the big giant doors were open. It was like an indoor-outdoor space. It's one of my favorite patios in the entire region. And I feel just so much better.
The sunlight and this, after a very gloomy winter can do that to you. I was not outside, but I also have good news. I started a new trial medication. So if I develop new mutant superpowers or, die, there's your reason for it.
I am all about mutant superpowers. Which mutant superpower would you want?
Super speed or teleportation or like wings or arms. Honestly, any of them that don't give me like extra eyes. That's really it. Anything that keeps me having two eyes but makes me a few chromosomes stronger than a regular human, I'll be okay with that.
I feel like doing what we do, teleportation would be the clutch one, right? Like imagine what stories, what breaking news, or what places you could be with teleportation, just some coordinates and bam, you're there. Fletcher Sharp, the ultimate breaking news reporter.
It would be like that movie Nightcrawler with Jake Gyllenhaal, except, not malicious. It's like, oh, news is broken. I'm right there. Here's footage. There you go. And then I'm back to the studio to talk about it. And then, something happened somewhere else. Boom, I got you. Then I'm back. Except, I'm not creating the problems like he was.
Now, do you think that teleportation would tire you?
You can't have superpowers and not have some sort of drawback. Like I know X-Men's Kurt Wagner, his teleportation, Nightcrawler, when he does it, it makes a smell of sulfur in the air. So when you smell it, he's either about to leave or go. People will be like, ugh, that guy. Or they'll smell it and be like, oh God, here he comes. Unless I don't care about how I smell, then, I'll teleport everywhere and let's just make everyone else deal with it.
All right, let's start with a bit of transit news. Two things with the suburban and city bus systems. SMART, the Suburban Mobility Authority for Regional Transportation, is decreasing frequency of buses to some routes to reflect the reality of staff shortages. Neither local system has enough drivers to operate at full capacity, and both have been plagued by late or missed trips. Starting April 10th, SMART is taking their Woodward fast routes from every 25 minutes to every half hour, a step back in service. The 9 Mile is going from every 30 minutes to every 45. A lot of advocates kind of believe that you really need to be in that half hour kind of range for frequent service. Once you start getting to an hour, the closer you get to an hour, the less people use it. The Detroit Department of Transportation is doing some reshuffling too, starting later in April, but it's more spreading the service out. They're going to be adding some trips a bit earlier and a bit later in the day to try to pick up more people and spread out those times to deal with the resources that they've got. 10 routes will see trips a bit earlier in the morning. 6 will see trips a bit later at night. Between the two Metro Detroit systems, they are hundreds of drivers short. Although SMART drivers make a bit more, Detroit's wages start out at $15 an hour. Those annual salaries are below the median income for the city and far below the median for the region. The national average for this kind of work is $22 an hour. For comparison, the Ann Arbor Transit Authority pays close to $29 an hour and generally do not have as much trouble finding help.
They need to pay them. You want people to do a service, you have to give them the money to do so. You wonder why you're falling behind in terms of just people who want to do the job. It's because you're paying them way less than the regional average. And I understand with Detroit, I can't speak for any other cities, but I do know I can maybe select 10 Detroiters and maybe 6 of them have a horror story of riding on a Detroit bus. I know I have a few. Pay the people who drive the bus or else you're going to keep falling further and further behind. That's just the baseline. You can add whatever else you want to add after that.
The difference, though, from a budget perspective of $15 or $19 an hour in the case of the suburban system up to nearly $29, it's a question of priorities, though, Fletcher, right?
If I find out that I'm making 15 when I could be making 19, I'll probably wrinkle my face. If I find out I'm making 15 when I could be making 29, I'm quitting. That's it. I'm not doing that job anymore. And it's not that I don't want to work. I don't want to work for way less than what I should be paid.
There is a story in downtown Detroit that you wanted to talk about, Fletcher. Todd Scott of Detroit Greenways mentioned this one. Actually, before City Council, people will know that he has been on the show a number of times. And basically, there are chunks of sidewalk corners being cut off to make room for the race cars and the racetracks in downtown Detroit. Now, this is over behind the Rensen. It's an area where, yes, people definitely travel to like go to their cars and do different things, but it's not as high trafficked as some areas. But there are changes being made to the streetway for the Grand Prix. I believe it's 4 different corners. I will mention, to give you a little bit of context, one of those corners is Franklin and Rivard Street.
I understand why someone would see that and be like, well, they're making it a bit less safe for people to walk around there. But to your point, people don't really walk around there unless they're going to their cars or playing Pokemon Go. I think they can work on a compromise that would like maybe help it be a little bit, maybe not shave down the corners as much as they are shaving them down. But I think it's good overall. I think it's showing that you are putting your full weight behind the Grand Prix people to move it from Belle Isle to downtown. And honestly, in a way, I'm kind of happy that people have an issue with it, because it shows that people now understand what was happening at Belle Isle with it, where they just wrecked the island for an entire month for an event that really was a weekend. Now people will see these issues coming to downtown and maybe be more vocal and maybe be more conscious in what goes into setting up for the Grand Prix.
Are you generally in favor of the Grand Prix downtown over Belle Isle?
Yes, I am. One, because it's kind of like Monaco. I like watching cars that should not be on the street driving around the street that like maybe someone goes to work at. Oh, there's Jefferson. They're turning off Jefferson to go. Wow. Like that's something to me that's really cool. But also, I know that if it goes through downtown, when they need to clean it up, they're going to clean it up very quickly because downtown needs to be used. When it was at Belle Isle, they would shut it down, or they would not shut it down, but they would start the process of converting it to the Grand Prix about 3 weeks before, which would then limit it to like 1 lane for most of the island. And then they'd leave the stuff up for an additional 2 weeks after the event. So it'd be 1 lane going around the island. So when you're using Belle Isle every week and you get stuck in traffic jams on the bridge every week for an event that literally was 3 weeks ago, it's very frustrating and grates on your nerves. And I know I'm not alone with that. Many people who use Belle Isle frequently have an issue with that. I know a lot of people are like, well, at least at Belle Isle was out of the way. That's not the point. The point is people use Belle Isle a lot more often than a lot of people want to assume. And if it's downtown, again, they'll make sure that it doesn't take that long to set up and break down.
The reality is when it comes to the overall conversation, if it's in downtown Detroit, it'll get a lot more attention than it will anywhere else. The other thing I really realize, and I'm a little biased because I'm from the east side, you're from the east side, we love Belle Isle and we use Belle Isle a lot. But there are a number of listeners who've literally never been to Belle Isle before. They never understood what the hullabaloo was about. And I think that it's good that it's downtown. Downtown is designed for these kinds of events. We do need to be conscious of what we do to it. But I also think like there are some people, I've gotten these notes, that there shouldn't be a Grand Prix or it should be somewhere way out in the middle of nowhere. And I fully disagree with that. I think this is still the Motor City. Whatever you want to say, whatever Twitter wants to say, the idea of not having a major car race in Detroit, home to these automakers, is absolutely absurd. Like, live in reality. This is still the Motor City. Like, as much as I like transit, we just talked about transit, I think that there's a middle ground, and this idea that Detroit's going to go car-free is, I mean, absurd. Like, if you want to live in a car-free situation, there's like 2 places in America to do that.
If you want to say Detroit's back, what better way to show it by having a big international event down there to prove that Detroit is actually back? Now, whether you think Detroit's back or not is your own feeling. But if you want to try to say, oh, Detroit's definitely back, why wouldn't you have an event in the Motor City dealing with speeding cars, half of which are made by manufacturers? Like, why wouldn't you want that? Like, what? You want that to go out to like what? Clio or like Oxford? Like what? No, like that needs to happen here in the city here. If you want to do, I'm one of these people. I'm a stickler for this, and I hope I don't get people throwing stuff at me. But when the Pistons played in Auburn Hills and were the Detroit Pistons, I didn't like that very much. I understood why, because the Palace was a really great facility to host events and host the Pistons and host other things. Play in the city, or at least play close to the city. Don't play like an hour outside of the city. Play near the city or play in the city. So to have events like that and just take them way out of the city just because you don't want them on top of your stuff, that's silly to me. It's a lot of other words to me, but we'll just go with silly for today.
You know, my thing is this. Cities are supposed to be hubs. Detroit is a hub. And if it's not a hub of things, it will continue to lose population. It will continue to have issues, because that's the whole point of a city. If you don't encourage events and things that happen and people to gather, then it's going to eventually dissolve away. And this is civilization. Like, I don't say this flippantly. Like throughout human history, cities have come and gone, and they go when they're no longer a place that people want to congregate or a place there where those special events and things happen. And that is the part of the important role that greater downtown Detroit plays, like for better or worse. If you don't have those kind of things, then you just basically have a big suburb.
Yep.
Next to other suburbs.
Yep. We have enough of those in Metro Detroit.
All right, let's talk about something more fun. If you get into the ballpark at Comerica Park this year or pay attention, the field underwent some changes. Center field came in from 422 to 412 feet. The wall was lowered down from 8.5 to 7 feet. Other walls dropped height too in the outfield. Right field and right center field have dropped to 7 feet. One of those walls was more than 13 before. I mean, it seems like tweaks, but I feel like this could impact the game. What are your thoughts, Fletcher? I wanted to ask you because you're a resident sports guy.
I mean, I know Comerica Park is like one of the least favorite hitters fields in the entire league because it's so far away and the walls are so high that like average home runs in most places tend to be fly balls. I know someone a while ago did a story for Miguel Cabrera saying he would have hit his milestones a little bit earlier had he played in a different park because a lot of his fly balls that just got right to the fence would have been very clearly over the fence home runs. I think it helps the game, especially they're putting this initiative in with the pitch clock to make the game go quicker that some people hate, some people like. They're trying to make it appeal more to the common man. So in order to do that, you need to have runs. You need to have the ball, be in play quicker. You need the game not to take 6 hours for whatever reason it needs to take. So yeah, I'm all for it if it's going to make the game, keep the game still the same game. Like don't switch the baseball with like a hot dog or something. But like keep the game still generally the game. As long as the rules don't change the core nature of the sport, then yeah, I'm with it.
Do you think that these rules that have been rolled out so far have changed it, or do you think they're improvements?
I mean, I understand why you want a pitch clock, but like I feel like these umps are kind of taking a chance to be a little bit extra powerful just because like, well, now if you don't throw it by now, it's a ball. And if you argue about it, I'll throw you at like that. It feels like it gives them another chance to make the game about them when people are really there to see the athletes, not the guy in a cage. But I understand why they have to be a little bit more forceful because I do know that players will try to use any advantage they can to help themselves. Jury's still out for me on the pitch clock because I've seen some instances where you have some pitchers who like to hold on to the ball for too long. It makes them get rid of it. But you see some people making some wilder pitches because they're under a little bit more duress than they normally would be.
I have a possibly unpopular opinion, and I actually am for these wall changes, even though I say this. I actually believe that all the focus on home runs has kind of screwed up the game a little bit. I think the game's a lot more fun when you have a variety of singles, doubles, triples, and home runs. And I feel like so much that's happened with the game has made it so home run focused. And, I know that there isn't the shift and things like that. You're not supposed to be able to do that anymore. But all the emphasis being on home runs means that the thing that everybody goes for is home runs. And I think the game's a lot better when you've got a variety of hits going on.
I don't like the shift rule. Honestly, if you can't hit opposite field as a professional baseball player, like, what are you doing? Like, you should just be out. Like, as a recreational slow pitch softball player, yeah, it takes me a second, but I can go opposite field. If they're paying you $80 million, you should be able to go opposite field too.
So the so-called greatest eater in history was in town, Joey Chestnut for the Pistons. This story even made it to TMZ. And let me tell you, that is the bastion of truth right there. But I'll tell you, they're not always right, but when you see it on TMZ, you're like, maybe they're ahead of something. Anyway, the man took down 38 chicken wings in 3 minutes and 13 seconds. Get it? 3 and 3. Anyway, we all do that. The thing. It was an insane feat to watch online. There are clips everywhere. He also tells Eater Detroit that he is a Lafayette Coney guy, something I can partially endorse. And Faygo Rockin' Rye over Red Popper Vernors and barbecue Better Made chips to the original. I'll put the link to that in the show notes. This is as he also took down 11 conies with chili, onion, and mustard for charity at a game this week against the Miami Heat. It was all to support Forgotten Harvest. So the chicken wings were in front of the team. The coney dogs were in front of the game. This man is still a beast.
I'll admit when Joey Chestnut first popped up, I was a little bit skeptical because my guy Takira Kobayashi, who was the eating champion, was, eating everything. Kobayashi had eaten, they're like crystal sliders, which is like the rest of the country's version of like White Castles. He ate like 100 of those in 10 minutes, which is disgusting to think about. but like it's still amazing to see. But Joey Chestnut has just kept going up at the Nathan's hot dog eating competition that happens on 4th of July. And honestly, he's a pretty good dude. Like, he does a lot of things. He'll eat some pretty insane things, but most of it goes towards charity. Hearing that is like a great thing for me. Yeah, I like Kobayashi because he does his little Kobayashi shake. Him preferring Coney over anything. Yeah, it's because he has taste buds. Like, I'm not, of course. Like, he has to eat these things. So, of course, he'd rather want to eat something that's actually pretty good versus, you know, something that might be rubber.
So you're a Lafayette guy.
Yeah, there's some stories why I am, and people can directly ask me why, and I'll tell you why. But yeah, I'm a Lafayette person for that reason alone. It's great to see that he was here for that. Competitive eating is like an actual sport. I know some people wanna down it because it's just eating, but to see how the way they train, like I know Chestnut, Kobayashi, another guy, one of their training practices, they get like 3 pounds of shaved ice, get some Tabasco, and they eat it so it expands their stomach to be able to eat what they eat.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's I watched a little document. It's insane. Some of the things they eat though, it don't make sense. Like I know he ate 11 conies, which no, like I eat 2, and I'm like, yeah, I need an enzyme real quick. But yeah, some of the records, you know, like eating cow brains, eating pickles, eating matzo ball soup, just whatever you can think. There's a record for someone who ate way more in it. And like, don't think too hard because it'll make you not want to eat what you're eating. But it's amazing to see some of these people at work, and the training they put into it, like, lets you know it's definitely a sport.
There is a zen to it. I personally am a Dooley's guy. I know that's like a alternative pick, but I'd love to hear what you guys think. dailydetroit@gmail.com. Are you team Coney, or are you team vegan Coney and you're missing chili, mustard, and onions, which by the way, I learned they've brought their tzatziki sauce to the National Coney Island, a few locations, including the one on the Grosse Pointe Detroit border over there by 7 Mile.
Yeah, shout out to Pete at CMO. It's really unfortunate that CMO did have to close, but I'm glad that he's still operating in some capacity because he's a really good guy. And their food, once you get past the fact that it's vegan and you're like, vegan's gross, actually is pretty good. And I'll say that as somebody who, like, up until 5-6 years ago was very much like, if it's not meat in it, I don't want it. No animal product, get it out of here. Now I'm like, you know what? There is some benefit to some of this. Their bun cake they had at CMO was one of the best desserts I've ever had in my life.
Before we go, a listener sent me this petition and I had to share it with you. It is to make Vernors Michigan's official drink. It's one of those change.org things, so I don't think it's like official, but they are arguing that Vernors should be the official drink of Michigan. I don't know. I want to bring it up to you because I'm not sure if I agree. And I apologize to the listener who sent this. Please sign the petition. And if you feel this way, go sign the petition. I'll put a link in the show notes. But I'm not sure I agree that Vernors should be for a number of reasons. I'll share mine later, but Fletcher, what do you think?
Growing up, I did not like Vernors at all. And I know as like a native Michigander, like a Detroit native, that's like blasphemous. But for a while, I just didn't like Vernors, and I had to figure out why. And the reason why mainly is because when I was feeling stomach upset or something like that, it's like, drink Vernors, you'll feel better. So like I associated it with just being sick and feeling uncomfortable. Now I like Vernors. It's a nice beverage. It's not my favorite ginger ale.
Hot take. What is your favorite ginger ale? Bring it out.
Either Canada Dry or the Faygo version.
I got to tell you, for a cocktail, Canada Dry, I really like Canada Dry for cocktails because the Vernors, I'm not against it, but the Vernors brings a lot of sweetness to your cocktail.
Or even like the Town Club version of their ginger ale, which is kind of like Vernors, but it's less harsh. I don't think it should be the beverage of the state or the city, but I understand why people might think that because Vernors is sold here. I know I have people who've left for New York, Chicago, California who are like, could someone send me back a bag of Better Made and some Vernors? Because they, if you want to buy them out here, if you find them, they're way more expensive because they're very much imports. They don't ship them here very often. So I understand why. If this were to actually pass, it'd be like an actual petition that really picked up speed and became like something that, you know, Gretsch signed into the state laws. I'd understand and say, okay. But like, if you're asking me, I'd be okay if it wasn't too.
My argument is this. Vernors is no longer truly a Michigan-made thing or Michigan-owned thing. I think if we're going to have a state drink, it needs to be one owned here. And so that definitely puts Faygo in the running. Also, other parts of the state, I'm more than glad to hear your arguments of what you think should be. And I, of course, will listen to listeners at dailydetroit@gmail.com. But I don't think it's appropriate. I mean, I'm sure that some of the things, maybe they're bottled here or bottled in part here, one of like the bottlers, but I don't like the idea of knowingly making the Michigan State drink something that isn't owned here, unless they do an investment or do something where they're like, hey, we're going to do Vernors here, you know, where it used to be, that kind of thing. Because the Vernors plants were a big deal. In fact, there was the Vernors plant for a time. Obviously, people have talked about the one in downtown Detroit that was there. But for a time, it was also up at near the David Whitney house, because that was on the old site of the old Detroit Convention Center on Woodward there with the big Vernors gnome sign and everything, which, oh my gosh, I wish somebody had salvaged that. I actually enjoy Vernors in the right circumstances. I'm not anti-Vernors. I just think that if we're going to do a Michigan State drink or a Michigan State pop, it needs to be ours, like owned in ours.
Definitely.
Love your thoughts. dailydetroit@gmail.com. Fletcher Sharp, so good to talk to you. We talked a little bit of sports, but it was good to get into a bunch of other topics around town too. And thanks for hopping in on this Thursday.
Definitely. I have to show that I'm multifaceted so people can see that I bring more than just sports to the table.
Of course, if you do want a little bit more sports and you want to do something that's maybe more than just Detroit stuff, you were a guest on the Protagonist podcast this week. And that was a pretty good listen too. If you want to learn more about the league that Detroit City FC plays in and the teams around it, then we kind of are going to cover in our format. That's something you can go check out. And you can listen to Fletcher for like more than a half an hour.
I gave a few updates for how I feel the season's going, and I gave a prediction for this weekend, which if you are a Detroit City FC fan, you probably won't like it. If you're a Louisville City fan, you'll probably be trying to high-five me. So,
all right, with that, I am Jer Stays. Thank you so much for listening to your Daily Detroit. Remember that we are supported by our members, patreon.com/Daily Detroit. If monthly membership is not your thing, buymeacoffee.com/Daily Detroit. Any support is appreciated. Thank you so much for listening. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit.